You're going to give us an industry perspective from your organization's point of view. Here, here, hold on. I have to shake your hands first. I'm not very good at this two devices thing. I apologize.
The fact that we're still using these is a little crazy.
Well, it is. It's an audio guy thing. You know, it makes it easier than putting these on everyone. So just before you start your presentation, can I ask you, maybe just explain, you've got a pretty good relationship with iGel, and maybe just talk a little bit about what that is and why you're here so they understand, okay, why is Stephen a part of this? Because I know you've been working with iGel for a while.
So the story is I was running Broadcom's IoT business unit about 18 months ago. And
maybe just do this a little bit more if you would. Thank you.
Get a little closer there?
Yeah.
I was running Broadcom's IoT business about 18 months ago, and it was decided that we were going to sell the business unit. You might have heard this, and we sold it to Cypress. And kind of the way this happens when you're a GM of a business unit you sell, it's really kind of cool, and you kind of sell the unit, and it's really exciting, and then they tell you to leave. That's kind of how it works, right? I mean, that just is how it works, right? It's like, thank you, we bought you. We don't really want you. We just want all the technology we want. So I started to do some, I didn't get in a van and go to the Badlands. That sounded actually fun.
That sounded cool, didn't it?
Yeah, wow.
We're all going, hey, I want to do that.
Wow, I didn't do that. So I started doing some work around IoT and trying to really understand where this was going to fall, because it is still a little mysterious, right?
Absolutely.
So Jed gives me a call up and says, this is going to sound familiar. Jed calls me up and says, can you have lunch? And Simon shows up at lunch. And says, hey, look, you know, we really think we have an IoT play here. And I said, well, of course you have an IoT play. You're an endpoint control company. That's what IoT is. You're controlling endpoints.
Right.
And I think the piece that everybody's missing in all this is that the basic platform that we've been using in the last 10 years to move to virtual computing, the idea of there's going to be a bunch of endpoints, there's going to be applications, and we got to get those applications to those endpoints and data from those endpoints back to those applications, is exactly the basic topography that we're going to use for IoT. Okay. The only difference is multiply it by 1 billion. Because we're going to go from hundreds and thousands of endpoints to millions and billions of endpoints. Now that creates lots of scalability, and lots of the Citrix and VMware partners that are here are all facing how to do that, and they've made announcements around that.
Right.
But that's the big thing. So take everything that iGel's been doing, multiply it by 1 billion, you got IoT.
Cool. Okay, well, you know, and as Monique told us, there's 7.5 billion humans that are going to be things on endpoints as well. So just start with 7.5 billion.
The problem is it's 7.5 billion by all the things we're going to be wearing. So it's a very interesting point that I'm about to make in the presentation about that.
You do that. I'm going to give you your clicker.
I get a clicker.
You get a clicker.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. So I want to try to make this a little bit fun, and I want to try to make it real informative. I'm going to try to ask you to just forget about everything you've heard about IoT for a little bit, and let's start with a clean slate. First of all, what we do at IoT Group, and it's more than me, there's a group of us, are basically a bunch of people who come out of places like computing, wireless, Wi-Fi, networking. So we're a bunch of people who all did this for our careers for a long time and kind of felt that the next thing to do was in the IoT space. And the reason we felt that was you started putting memory in PCs, who were the previous one? Okay, I started fixing calculators, okay? So in 1978, I was in high school and I got a job with a calculator company to fix calculators after school. And that was it, I was done. After that, my entire career was in technology. So I've lived through a few of these evolutions. And one of the things about each of these kind of major evolutions, I programmed on a mainframe in high school. I sold mini computers after I graduated university. For those of you who may not know, I ran HP's America's PC business for a number of years. That was a $16 billion business. So I kind of understood the whole client-server business really well. And then we had the cloud. This is what I would call the 5th generation of compute. And the big difference about this generation of compute is that the amount of technology and where the technology goes is going to change, because we're going to end up with billions of endpoints that aren't so smart, controlled by a really, really brilliant cloud using a platform that's going to look and feel a lot like what we did when we did mini computers. It is the beginning of the bringing together of the entire evolution of everything we went through. So to do that, we really have to define it, identify it. So customers have to select what it is they want to do. Eventually, that's got to get built and deliver. And this is kind of the methodology that we're seeing you go through as you try to make your decisions around IoT. And the reason that we go through this methodology with customers when they're deploying their first IoT projects is that the very interesting part about IoT is the scale of it. There's no joke. The difference between what you do today with end-user computing versus what you're going to do tomorrow with IoT can be multiplied by a B, because the number of endpoints will be in the billions. Let's take a look at the point about how many people exist. There's 7 billion people in the world today. 7 billion. Those 7 billion people are going to affect the size of this IoT market. And it's not because we're all going to have wearables. It's because we're all going to use things. Now, those 7 billion people today carry 5 billion cell phones. There are 5 billion cell phones connected on cell phone networks today. 5 billion. So how many are connected? 5 billion. That number is going to rise dramatically, not because we're going to be carrying 2 or 3 phones, but because we're going to have devices that are going to have cell phone technology put into them as soon as we have 5G. So the number of cell phone connections that are going to go through the networks that we see that your companies manage and run are going to triple in the next 10 years. Not because of the number of people are going to triple, but the number of things that are going to have a cell phone attached to it is going to triple. If you think about PCs, we have never in the history of our industry shipped more than about 360 million PCs in a year. And today we ship about 240 million. And tablets we ship about somewhere around about 200 million a year. Life cycle is about 4 years. So basically, if you think about it, the entire population of things today connected on networks, the entire population of things connected on networks today is under 10 billion things. Under 10 billion. We've taken 30 years since I was fixing a calculator back in 1979 to now. We only got about 10 billion things connected on the networks. The entire infrastructure for telecom is designed for about 10 billion things. That's it. The entire infrastructure for the world's telecom system is designed for 10 billion things. The smallest forecast is that we're going to add 20 billion more things to that network in the next 5 years. Just think about the scale issue of that. That's why you're seeing 5G tests getting launched all over the place. That's why you're seeing companies like VMware and Citrix and Cisco and Aruba rethinking strategies. The number of things that will be connected at the end start to impact the network and the platforms that have to support that network and all of the applications that are going to run on those platforms that are supported by those networks. IoT is about scale. And the number of things that will be connected will change our industry dramatically. And it's going to change it in every single way. Hardware will change dramatically. The typical endpoint today is your cell phone. Your cell phone costs $1,000. The typical IoT endpoint is a sensor. A sensor costs $1. How many sensors can you deploy when those sensors only cost $1? Our transmission system today is basically on the 4G network and Wi-Fi. Today, there are probably 200 phones trying to touch the Wi-Fi. Tomorrow, this room could have 2,000 sensors in it. What kind of Wi-Fi change has to occur? How does applications control that much data? Today, we send messages like a Word document. Tomorrow, we're going to send messages like a little temperature. And the difference is you're going to send 3 or 4 Word documents today. That sensor is going to send 5,000 readings of that temperature tomorrow. Completely change how a network works. Networks used to be designed to send large pieces of files. Tomorrow, they're going to have to be designed to send itty-bitty bits of information. Platforms are going to have to deal with knowing where 10,000 things are or 1,000,000 things are versus knowing where 100 things are. And eventually, the analytics around that are going to become incredibly important, as will security and services, because at the end of the day, you got to know exactly what all those billions of things are doing. So that's why you see every single people say that the addressable market of this will be $3 trillion. Now, why is that important? It's important because the IT industry's addressable market is only $3 trillion today. What industry doubles its value in just 5 years? What 30-year-old industry does that? That's why IoT is so important for all of us to look at. The evolution of being able to connect everything tells us that everything is about to change. Now, there are a lot of ways in which this money is going to get used and dispersed across this $3 trillion, but one of the very interesting ways, and you see the little piece that says middleware, might be the most important. It might be the most important because it's the middleware that's going to glue the nodes and the end servers and the applications and the services all together. Now, before we get much further, this is an industrial conversation, right? We are commercial practitioners. We run businesses. But some of the most fun things that are happening in IoT are happening in consumers. How many of you have an Alexa or Google Home? How many of you have one? Yes, very nice, very nice. Voice will be the killer application of consumer IoT. Voice is the killer application. And voice is the killer application because at the end of the day, consumers do not like remote controls, and they certainly don't like these things. You will very soon no longer touch a button at home. You will speak into your TV remote control. You will speak to your Alexa. Every plug you're going to buy is going to be Alexa or Google Home enabled. It is inevitable that we have cracked the code for the consumer interface. The consumer interface is voice, and the consumer IoT interface is voice. And this is the way that it's going. But on the industrial side, it's a completely different thing. The industrial side has always been about really understanding where assets are, understanding how to control assets and manage them. So the commercial side, the killer value proposition is going to be service. And the services that those IoT products and endpoints and platforms deliver. So what we believe is going to happen is that the majority of the units deployed in IoT will be consumer, but the majority of the economics of IoT is going to be service contracts. That will be the massive amount of, Mr. Burke, I'm going to charge you for every slide you take a picture of, okay? I work hard on these slides. Now, the part of it that we're here to talk about is really the platform. What is going to connect the billions and billions of endpoints to the applications that are going to provide the services that need to get delivered? And that kind of IoT kind of management platform is what we're here to really talk about. And that's basically my premise, is that things like what iGel delivers today, what the iGel UMS is today, its operating system, its control panel, its endpoint agent, are basically the same foundations that we're going to need for an IoT platform. The only difference is we've got to multiply it by a B. So if you take a look at the idea of going from connecting to an endpoint all the way to delivering to an enterprise application, these are kind of the steps in the middle, and the IoT platform, that's the middleware. And that middleware has a real value. We think it's $1 trillion marketplace just in the middleware space. And the reason that we think that this is going to be huge, probably somewhere around a $10 billion market over the next number of years, is because if you take a look at the history of every evolution that we have done in the PC industry, it is the middleware that needs to be matured before the rest of the industry comes together. So for those of you who lived around the client-server business, you will remember WebLogic and WebSphere, and the way we made everything start to connect was when those platforms became available. Because at the end of the day, we're connecting an old industry to a new industry, and it was without that middleware, without that glue, without that platform, we were not able to do it. BEA was the fastest technology company to $1 billion because they understood this. Basically, they had the same premise that iGel had. How do I take a bunch of endpoints, at that time they were revolutionary PCs, and connect them to a bunch of applications that were sitting at that time in mainframes? That's what WebLogic was. That's what WebSphere was. That's what middleware was. That's what is the glue that will hold IoT together. And at the end of the day, the network's going to look something like this. There's going to be a whole lot of endpoints, billions of them. For a medical industry, it could be a hospital today, a mid-sized hospital today has 10,000 medical devices in it. No one knows where they are. Which floor are they on? Which room are they in? Are they being used? Are they not being used? Do you know how we know that? Somebody writes it on a piece of paper. May not be the most efficient way to do something. We estimate that the average hospital could reduce its capital purchase of medical devices by 12% if they actually knew where they were all the time. What's that mean in real dollars? How much money would a hospital be willing to invest if they could not have to buy as many DNA analysis machines and blood pump machines? It's a huge movement of capital from medical devices to IT technology. The IT technology, by the way, continues to serve and continues to add value as it goes on. So those devices go into something called a gateway, or basically, if you think about it, it's kind of where the server is, which collects all the material and all the information, which eventually goes into an application. But the real key to this is the console, because the console is what tells you where all those medical devices are, tells you whether they're not being used or not. And that hooks up to a billing system, which then is able to automatically create a billing system and be able to charge the patient for using the blood pump. So this basic architecture, endpoints, edge computing, console management, and application, is the functional platform of how we see every one of the IoT solutions being deployed. Now, there's lots of companies that are trying to do this. This is exciting. There are 260 companies that we have found at our at IoT Advisory Group that have announced that they have an IoT platform, 260. After that, we ran out of just energy to look at them anymore. You know some of these companies, you don't know a lot of them. So one of the interesting things is that there's a lot of new entrances. But that happens in technology change. We often see new entrances. Usually, though, at the end of the day, it's some of the companies like iGel who have been around for a long time, who actually end up delivering the most robust platform, the most sophisticated middleware to be able to glue all the pieces together. And there's a big hole in this layout. So when you look at all of these companies who are running around, one of the things that's really missing in most of these platforms is device management. Yet we're talking about having platforms that have to control billions of devices. It is a hard thing to do to control endpoints. It's something that we're talking to iGel about how they can use their endpoint technology to become a big player in the IoT space. There's clearly an opportunity here. At the end of the day, lots and lots of companies are involved in this, and we track all of these companies. There's this big red sign that says, "Time's up." So it does. It says it right there, time's up. Did they do that for JED too? No, probably not. So we track all these companies, but basically, you know, we kind of look at the industry all the way from IP licensing all the way to providing to service providers. But I'll finish up on a quick story. So I get this phone call. Amazon announces that they're making their own stores about 1.5 years ago, and the stores are going to be connected. And I don't know if you know how they're doing this, but everybody kind of gave up this crazy idea that, oh, they were going to put RFID codes in grapefruit or something, and then all this other stuff. But we kind of knew that wasn't where they were going. What we had forecasted was that they were really using this as an experiment to get into other retail. And it was announced that they were going to buy a grocery chain called Whole Foods. Is everybody familiar with this grocery chain? So what's interesting about Whole Foods, pretty high-end grocery, right? So let me tell you something about grocery stores that is very similar to online selling. And if I may just have 2 minutes, I think it's a good story, even though my time's up. So when you guys go on Amazon.com, Amazon knows what you're surfing for, right? They know what website you look at, right? They tell you, hey, you bought this book, you should buy that book, right? They said you bought this, you bought a Garmin computer for your bike, you should buy a Garmin power sensor for the pedals, right? You expect that, right? How many of you shop in the same grocery store every week? Yeah, all of us do. If you want to take a look at the most persistent shopping experience you have, it's actually not online, it's the grocery store. Because you probably go to the same grocery store because it's close to your house. By the way, you tend to go to the same grocery store because you know where everything is on the shelves. And if for those of you who have been living in the same house for 20 years, like Mr. Burke back there, he's and his wife been shopping the same grocery store for 20 years. That grocery store should know when Mr. Burke had his first child, when Mr. Burke had his second child, when those kids became high school kids because the amount of food he bought went way, way up, and most of it was the garbage that the high school kids eat. He probably knows when his high school kids went to college because all that grocery was completely changed again. I can tell you more about you from your grocery list than from anything else you do in your life. Isn't it interesting that the company that knows the most about your online shopping just bought the kind of store where you can know the most about your everything else of your life shopping? This is about learning about us. And what's really going to be exciting about this is that they are going to be able to do the following things, whether you like it or not. They are going to, when you walk into a Whole Foods, want you to get on their Wi-Fi, and they're going to give you an incentive to do it. Once they're on your Wi-Fi, they're going to watch where you shop. They're going to watch where you walk around the store. They're going to know that you buy detergent at a frequency rate, and then they're going to be able to say to you, you know what? That's great. Why don't we just send that to you on subscription? You don't have to haul that detergent to your car. They're going to say, Bob, it's Tuesday. You want those T-bone steaks again? And you're going to love this because it's going to make the shopping experience really empowering. And what's really going to be valuable about this is that we're going to start to get a lot more intelligence thanks to a smart store about what you should buy in the store and what you should have on subscription because of Amazon buying Whole Foods. At the end of the day, Whole Foods stores will become smarter. But what's really going to be cool about this is at the end of the day, we will become smarter shoppers, and it'll happen because there'll be a platform that will be able to really mix multiple points from our lives. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be a service. So I will wrap up on that exciting note. Don't be afraid to go to Whole Foods. Thank you very much for coming in. I hope you have an exciting journey to IoT.
That was fantastic. Thank you, Stephen.